Hello, welcome to Back Pocket, Australia's favourite gaming podcast, as voted up by us, the hosts of Back Pocket, Australia's favourite gaming podcast. The Back Podcast, sorry, it's not Back Pocket, it's called the Back Podcast. I was screaming 2 seconds before we cut to the show, so I'm a little verklempt right now. It's Monday the 20th of June, 2022. I'm Nick Richardson, and today I'm joined by Peter Marjorie Burns, and she needs you all to know that if you're on King Street, do not give Glumprit any milk. It's Ruby Inns.
Thank you so much for. I can hear like an audience screaming, crying, and just like cheering in the background. So
The screaming and crying was me.
Thank you so much. Do not give Glumprit any milk. He will come to you on the street and beg you for milk. But the thing is, if you give him milk, you'll find yourself entranced watching him drink milk at a petrol station. And that's the last thing you want, especially if you've got a busy day.
I want to know, does he only appear at petrol stations, or if you give him milk, will he then take you to the closest petrol station?
Yes.
Okay, that's even worse.
Yeah, exactly, because you probably don't need any petrol because you're walking.
Exactly. Okay, Pete, what do you have to add to that?
Will he take flavored milk?
Yeah, he will take any milk.
Okay, because I don't like
But it's
flavored milk.
important to
So
not-
if I end up with some flavored milk, I might give it to him.
It's a really bad idea.
Okay.
It's a horrible idea.
You don't like any flavor?
I just gave him some toffee banoffee milk from Oak.
That kind of sounds delicious, though.
Yeah, that sounds really good. How about not even a malt milk? Not even a malt?
Yeah, I'll take a malt, but that's barely a
Take
flavor.
malt? I can't believe it. You don't fuck with a strawberry milk?
Not really. Maybe if I was like
I
3.
don't fuck with the strawberry milk.
Yeah.
Ruby,
Ugh.
you don't fuck with a strawberry milk either? What
I
about a
know,
chocolate milk?
I'd be loving pink, but like the only flavored milk, like fruit flavored milk I can do is banana. Because I like banana
Right,
smoothie.
okay.
Fake banana flavor
It's
is-
already kind of milk-like. I would say that banana is a milk-like fruit.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, when you said the only fruit flavored milk, I was like, that sounds awful. But then I realized strawberry, which I
That's
just
what
think is
strawberry milk
it's actually,
is.
but it's actually pink flavored. That's what it is. The flavor is
Oh,
pink.
it's Kirby flavored.
Yeah, but you're right. Banana is banana flavored. It's not yellow flavored. And I would 100% back that banana is the closest fruit to milk that we have.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you could put what, Pete?
Do you mean banana?
What?
Banana as a flavor is the closest flavor to milk?
Banana as a fruit. Because if you take a banana and you blend it in a mixer,
Basically milk.
it's basically like a milk-based smoothie. Is what you essentially have, right, Ruby?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even just as a base phrase, banana is the closest to milk. The end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so my final question on this:
just
what
accept
happened
that
if you
now.
gave Glumprit a banana?
He would spit in your face.
Right. Okay.
He would say, "How dare you?" and he'd spit in your face. He's very rude. He's very rude. He wants
sounds it.
nothing but milk.
He's just very rude. What a terrible boy. Before we get started, and I promise we will get started. Limbot wanted to know if you punched anyone at Supernova. I don't know where this came from.
Unfortunately, I didn't see anybody I knew at Supernova because I was in a trance from everything going on, especially all the Joker merchandise. So I was just kind of going around like, I might have punched somebody in the head that I didn't remember. But unfortunately, nobody. I'm a woman of consent, and I think it's important that someone, instead of me going, I would much prefer if someone came to me and was like, "Ruby, my dear sweet boy, punch me in the head," and then I would go, "Okay, sure thing."
Yeah, okay.
But like, I'm not the sort of person who would just like punch someone in the head unprovoked. They'd have to ask.
Sure, but if they did ask, you're down.
I would absolutely do it. I'd do it halfway through them going, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, sweet.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still a sucker punch.
I-
They wouldn't see it coming, but they've already consented to it.
Yeah.
They get the thrill of the surprise.
I do like that. To the question, did you punch anyone at Supernova, your answer was no. Unfortunately, I didn't see anyone I knew, which just implies that you only want to beat up
Bunch of mate.
people that you know. That if you're if you're a friend of Ruby, know that she secretly wants to punch you.
If you're a stranger, you're safe. But if you're anybody that I know, even a smidge, watch your back.
Watch the fuck out.
Especially if you're my friend that I love.
All right, that is a great way to get this gaming podcast started. Thank you very much, Ruby, for coming back. Oft requested, I would nearly say fan favorite. I would definitely say friend of the show, because I think you legally have to say that if you have a podcast with guests.
Yep.
So
My best friend.
Of the show. No punching. No punching.
Peter,
I barely know you.
My best friends, I will not punch with.
Okay, good. All right, Pete, I feel like we got to move on with some video game news because this show is not going to break itself. I mean, technically, the show.
I think you said this show is not going to break itself. Yeah.
Yeah, which is totally true. The show breaks itself all the time. The show broke itself when I said this show will not break itself because the show was like, what the fuck? What are you doing to me? Of course, the backup is brought to you by one of our top stitch patrons and the best evil person we know, that lady who had a kid's birthday party over the weekend after learning what I did for work, spent 10 minutes telling me how video games were evil. Thanks, lady. That was a really awkward session of watching our kids play Pass the Parcel. Sorry, I mean Evil Spy Boy. Get your exclamation mark Spy Boys out in the chat, because thanks to his generous Patreon support, Evil Spy Boy is bringing you the backup, and he's hoping you bring the generosity to Food Bank Australia. Food Bank provide regular breakfast to more than 132,000 students at schools across the country, and on top of this, more than 200,000 kids seek food relief from their charities every single month. Nightbot has a link to Food Bank. Thanks to Evil Spy Boy, and head to tasteofmultifish.com for more info about Evil Spy Boy's proclivities. I would normally move on with the show now. I just really fucking hated that lady. It was such a weird conversation to have. It's not like I'm not like a coal miner where she has some sort of like real moral, like I think you're
against the working class.
Yeah,
like a real moral objection to yeah.
His hands have never lifted anything.
What's there to hate? I'm clean.
Exactly.
Well, she's right. Video games are evil.
It's true.
Yeah, but don't fucking tell me about it right
I
after.
want to know.
I'm allowed to say video games are evil because I play video games. This is like I can make jokes about how, like, my mother or whatever, but no one else can say shit about my mother or punch them in the face as long as they're friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I don't trust anybody who says that League of Legends is a bad game unless they're an avid League of Legends player that has 100,000 hours.
Yeah, you need to be a LOL esports player to be able to trash talk League of Legends.
And every single one of them hates it. And I trust
100%. 100%. I used to work with League of Legends in the OPL. They all hate that game. But they are trapped. They are trapped in that fucking game. All right, let's move on now and look at the biggest stories of the week as voted on by us, the host of the Backup, where we back up and look at the biggest stories of the week. Ruby, as our guest, please start us off with a story that made you back up and say, hey, that's a pretty big story.
Well, Dragon's Dogma 2, baby. Woo! Very exciting. So basically, during the Capcom showcase that surprise, Capcom did. They announced that there would be a Dragon's Dogma 10th anniversary video, which I personally was like, that's funny. That's funny to announce a video instead of any kind of big news in the showcase. So at first I was like, interesting. Are they just going to kind of do like a black and white slow motion, like walking past a lake and like throwing a stone in, and then he's thinking about Dragon's Dogma? Is like that the vibe we're getting? No. In fact, they showed off pretty much the trials and tribulations of making Dragon's Dogma and Dark Arisen, and then right at the end, it was quite a beautiful sight, to be completely honest. Like, they very clearly had a lot of love for the game, which I thought was really, really sweet. But then right at the end, Hideaki Itsuno, I think it's Daigo Akino, and Kenichi Suzuki. They worked on Dragon's Dogma. They're all kind of like standing in the line. They're like, one last thing, and then they all take off their overshirts to reveal a Dragon's Dogma 2 shirt. And they're like, Dragon's Dogma 2 is in development. And I was like, wow, that's what I was waiting for. which is very cool, very exciting. And then it was later revealed through a tweet that the game's going to be made using the RE engine, which is the same one that they used to make Resident Evil 7. That is going to look nice. It is going to look so good. I'm very excited.
For sure.
Oh, just that shot, like I love it.
That's
I
so
love
great.
it.
It was-
It's so good.
It was the weirdest 12 minutes, I think, out of all of the Summer Game Fest stuff. Like the conversation they had around Dragon's Dogma was very, like, you're right, they totally loved working on it, and it was very sweet. But at the same time, it was one of those things where it was like not particularly informative about how they made the game. It was kind
Absolutely
of like, we really liked the game, and then lots of just sort of like, and we wanted to work out how to make it fun. And that was definitely a challenge. And it's like, okay, cool. And then at the end, the reveal with the shirts. Hi, Will.
Hello.
The reveal with the shirts at the end was so bizarre, so strangely
funny.
cut. There was like weird hard cuts where like half a shirt is revealed, and then it's like a wide, and then it cuts to like him cheering, or no, him clapping hard, and then immediately cuts to him like seriously talking again halfway through the clap. They don't even let the clap finish. It was so strange.
I just
But,
feel like the shot of him, like they've all taken their overshirts off, and him with his thumbs up pointing at the shirt. The pause was so clearly made for me to screenshot, and I thought that was really beautiful, and I thought it was so smart and so stupid.
just
There's
thinking
nothing
about
I love more
all-
than a bit of silliness, a bit of goofiness.
Totally.
you
I
know?
was thinking about all the games journos who would need to include this in articles. And it's like, this moment is the shot that you need. This is the
The
reveal.
money shot, baby.
Yeah.
The money shot. And he did it. Oh,
I'm 100. So did you play the original?
I played Dark Arisen on
Yeah, right.
PlayStation 3.
Mhm.
I loved it.
And
Good
I've never played it. It's like one of those real gaps in like huge fantasy RPGs tend to scare me off a little bit. But I know that it has so much love, and like you, I think that the announcement that it's happening in RE Engine, which is so beautiful, but also traditionally has been basically, you know, like narrative single player confined space stuff, like or at least like set path stuff. The remakes of all the Resident Evil stuff has looked amazing. The last few Resident Evils have looked incredible. Seeing what this will look like in an open world, if this engine can handle the open worldness of an RPG and look anything like what those games look like, I mean, that's a dope looking world.
Yeah, it's going to look wild. I'm so excited.
And for me, like my only, like when I was playing Resident Evil 7, and I really loved it, the only thing that I wish that game had was the ability to climb all of that family. They were really unclimbable. And so...
And half of them were tall enough to climb.
Totally. Particularly when they turned into like biomass monsters. So, you know, hopefully we'll see that brought to life with Dragon's Dogma 2.
I'm of the personal belief that you should be able to climb anything in a game, including people your own size.
Yep.
Right, okay.
Just
Piggyback.
climb just right on top of them. Get on their shoulders and just like smack them in the head.
Yeah, if
to
you
make
really
run.
like them, punch them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Punch
if
'em
they're
from
your
above.
friend, of course.
Punch
yeah.
them from above.
Only if they're your friend.
Because some of the things about Dragon's Dogma, like that climbing on huge enemies, I did think it was a great point that one of the devs made in that video of like, everyone spends all this time building huge monsters in video games, and then you spend the whole game slashing
Slashing the little
their feet.
feeties.
Yeah, and the idea and that thing of like climbing on them, jumping and leaping, and not in a sort of quick timey kind of way, but like actually like you just did an attack that went up there, is not something that we've necessarily seen replicated too much else. Like we still, you know, you play Elden Ring, you play these action RPGs that are like Japanese JRPGs and stuff that have this, and it's still kind of like it's still feet slashing the whole time, which I think is really cool. And then the pawn system of like building your little NPC buddies and being able to share them online with other people and stuff. I think that's a really cool idea, and it could work really well in the idea of potentially not really a live service game, but something that's way more. We're all way more used to sharing on the internet. multiplayer sessions, playing with other people, and that sort of thing. So I think some cool ideas that exist in the first game that were almost like ahead of their time a little.
Yeah,
bit.
totally.
Cool. Well, I am. They showed nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
It's a very nice t-shirt, though.
I mean, it's a cool t-shirt.
That was not a blend. That was pure cotton.
Looks comfy.
Yeah.
They got me as well because like that whole time I didn't realize that they're all wearing black t-shirts underneath their like the hoodie. And one of them was wearing like a yellow flannel button up, and it's like never saw it coming. Like what a surprise at the end when because they also did the traditional like stand up like in these Japanese game announcement videos. A lot of it is there's a sort of small sense of ceremony and generally how they do this sort of stuff. So at the end when they lined up, that felt very much like just a traditional goodbye that you would see in any sort of Japanese press conference or something. And then the fact that there was a small strip tease at the end.
Yeah. With all these angles as well.
Video. Look at it. Look at the angles.
Yeah. That's some good coverage.
Amazing.
I love it.
And then the clap, and then hard cut for the clap.
Yep. Enough celebration.
Rocks.
Work to do.
They're just like, we're making it. Bye.
Yeah.
And I guess the final thing to say just around this announcement, all of it was very strange, was because Ruby, you covered the first Capcom thing with the fake out of like, we're going to be talking about Dragon's Dogma for the 10th anniversary. Like why they didn't have the whole Capcom thing on the Dragon's Dogma 10th anniversary thing was strange.
Yeah, well, the thing is like it's strange. It's funny to me. Like it's very funny to me to tease a trailer pretty much, but like tease a teaser even. But it's not even the first time that they've done it as well, which really gets me because like I think it was for Dark Arisen or was it for the original the Dragon's Dogma? One of them in a trailer they teased another trailer.
Amazing.
Which is just so funny. It's a bit goofy to me. and I think I wouldn't say it's completely on purpose, but I feel like it's definitely funny considering like, cool things are coming soon, and then it's like not so much a letdown, but rather just like something completely different.
Yeah. Well, I saw a ton of enthusiasm online for this, so there's lots of people excited. And I right now I'm looking Dragon's Dogma on Steam. Dark Arisen is $7, and I feel like that is potentially $7 well spent to at least check that game out. So we'll be waiting a while for 2, so there's plenty of time to dive into the hundreds of hours that you could spend in Dragon's Dogma 1. Peter, speaking of games with hundreds of hours in them, what is your big backup story?
Todd Howard said that Starfield's big. So
the man has a way with words.
We didn't expect that.
Crazy.
Obviously, there was the announcement. Well, not the announcement. More of a gameplay reveal and some of a breakdown of Starfield in the Xbox Bethesda showcase. And Todd, as he does, went on to say things that terrified people. Like 1,000 planets, and then went on to have an interview with IGN to a bit more of a deep dive on kind of the threads that they set up in this showcase. The main quest, 30 to 40 hours, so maybe another 20-25% bigger than what is typical of the last couple of releases from Bethesda, with Fallout 4 and Skyrim kind of sitting somewhere between like 25 and 30 hours. So 30 to 40 is a bit of a bump, particularly if people are there just to play through the campaign. It's a fair bit more game, and hopefully it's all entertaining and not just that's the extra time it takes to travel between systems. But if there's things to do on the way between the systems, then it could be a really fun process anyway. And talking to the concept of there's being thousands of planets, a lot of them are procedurally generated, and to kind of quell the fear that's set in the hearts of most, Todd Howard went on to say that there are the designed planets, and then there's procedural planets, and it's going to be very obviously signposted what's what. If you're going to a procedural planet, it's to, as you would go to a random cave in Skyrim, use that cool shit you just found to blow some stuff up, as opposed to you should do everything, you have to do everything. There was never that incentive really in Skyrim unless you were fully in love with it to go and clear every cave. And if you did that, you saw the procedural generation of caves at work and you're like, there's not a lot of design here. But the craft is on kind of the main quest and the more important story threads, which I think is pretty typical of a Bethesda game. And also, Limbo, it says time spent in loading screens. Absolutely. Like, that engine seems to, as the bigger your game save gets, the longer it takes to load it. But in terms of another concern people had about all those planets was like that it was actually going to just chug the system up. But because it's procedural and bitsy, it's engine doing a lot of the work. Apparently, it's not actually having too much of an impact on loading times. There's not a lot of difference between 50 planets and thousands of planets on the engine itself.
Yeah, cool. The my favorite quote from everything that he was talking about was he was saying, like, you kind of have to be careful with procedural content because sometimes it can create things that aren't ideal and you got to find where the fun is. And he said, there's a lot of ice balls in space. So that was one of our big design considerations. What's fun about an ice ball? And sometimes if ice ball, and it's okay if sometimes ice balls aren't fun. It is what it is. We'd rather have them and say you can land on them.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's such a, like, we're like, sometimes we went, they're not fun, but we still included them in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, I think this alleviated some of my concerns, I guess, in that it's saying the craftedness of the world. If you want to follow that, you don't need to be trudging through a bunch of procedurally generated or just like filler stuff. You can just like mainline that quest, and that it is built around. There's 4 huge cities in here. There's like the bespoke, handcrafted, really tailored stuff. There's a ton of it, and so you can just do that and basically ignore the rest if you want. It's there if you do feel like going out and searching for more resources, finding, exploring, and doing that sort of thing. They also said that you're not going to be jumping. It's not No Man's Sky in terms of you can fly from one planet to another.
Yep.
You are going to be loading between them because he's like the flying kind of added nothing. But Ruby, I'm curious. I feel like the Starfield reveal split a lot of people. Some people were like, "This is exactly what I wanted. This is totally the thing that I wanted from Bethesda. It's just Bethesda in space." And other people were like, "Oh, I thought that they would do something different, but this is just Bethesda in space." Where did you land on seeing Starfield for the first time?
Well, first of all, I love that Todd Howard's jacket is matching his shoes. He's a very shiny individual, and I think that's really beautiful.
I want to say that was the first thing we pointed out in the thing as well. Like, it is so deliberate. It is so spot on. He was wearing hoodies during the pandemic, and he's back in the leather jackets now. It's very exciting to see.
And it matches the shoes. I can't get over that. He's like, I got to match the highest thing on me, the lowest thing on me. Like, I think
he's very climbable in that outfit. Very climbable.
He looks like I could climb him, slap him on the head, and make him run. I look. If you are a fan of Starfield, that's great. If you are not a fan, that's great. Whatever is life. But I think it's too big. I think Starfield is not only big, it's too big.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everything ever should be like 4 by 4 meters. And like a cube. And the thing is, if it was just one planet, that's fine. But it's 1,000. And that's a lot. That's a big number.
I can't even count to 1,000.
I've tried and failed.
I get bored at around 80.
Yeah.
That's where the fun numbers stop.
At that point, I just want to like go have a juice box or something, And
think about all the video games that we currently have that we go, this is too big, this is too huge. Like Persona 5, oh, it's so long. Elden Ring, oh, it's so big. All those games are set on one planet.
Yeah, just one planet.
And so that's just one planet. The Witcher 3, one planet.
And that's the thing, I got overwhelmed
Skyrim,
with
one
Elden
planet.
Elden Ring for me was too big. And I got very overwhelmed. I was like, there's there's so much space, so many places to go, and I'm just one horrible, horrible goblin beast called
Yep.
Fart Smeller in this big old world. Not to mention, I tried to kill the first guy that called me a virgin, and he kept beating me to shit.
Yeah.
So, like, I was
Because
already...
you actually were a virgin. You didn't have the
I
fighting
was a
powers
virgin,
required.
so I was like, fair enough. Yeah, by the third time of him killing me, I was like, damn, I guess I have no bitches. You're so right. All right, fair enough. But, like, I loved it. I loved what I had played of Elden Ring, but I just got really overwhelmed by the sheer size of it. And then with Starfield, it's that, but you can also leave the planet and go to another big old area, and that terrifies.
Yeah, totally.
And so what if size aside, did the gameplay do anything for you? Are you a Bethesda fan in terms of like their systems and their sort of like a lot of go out and explore and make your own fun in some way?
Fallout, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really hope I get blamed for this, but I didn't care much for the Elder Scrolls games. Loved Elder Scrolls Online, but Elder Scrolls in general just didn't really do it for me. Like Skyrim, I couldn't get into, and Fallout I loved. But probably the game from Bethesda that I've liked the most recently has been Ghostwire Tokyo. And they were just published for it. But I liked that because like it had this beautiful picturesque Tokyo, but at the same time
very climbable.
It had its limits.
Yeah, totally.
And I like that. I like being stopped at a point.
Yeah, I think the conversation around this game has been really interesting because it's like it's Bethesda doing it's exactly what Bethesda do, which is make these massive games that sell millions of copies. But I think because they become more and more it's just as gaming gets bigger, right? When Skyrim came out, people were hyped about Skyrim. People already knew kind of the prestige of it was really like the Oblivion, Fallout 3. Morrowind is my favorite, and Bethesda were already a decent sized studio then, but it was like the Oblivion, Fallout 3, Skyrim trajectory that kind of made them one of the household game developers. It was like everyone knows Bethesda makes this kind of game. And like they've always felt to me like not at the cutting edge of pretty much any part of game development except how expansive they are.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a good thing, and it's not always fun, but I think what it offers is just this like it's nice to have that on the palette of what games can offer. And there are enough people out there that it's like the world's biggest niche release. It's for people who know exactly what they want out of it. They're going to get lost in it. I don't think there are people that just mainline the story of a Bethesda game. It's more common that people start playing it, start to enjoy the systems, and forget about the main story because it wasn't that good anyway. So they just go off and spend hundreds of hours kind of tinkering with whatever tiny little part of the game fascinated them the most, and then waste a bunch of time doing that. It's almost like Terraria, right? It's like where you accomplish nothing, but
when you think about it,
to the whatever the minutiae of the thing you're doing is, and the big stuff doesn't exist. It's just I'm doing this, and then you're like, oh shit, I've spent 400 hours in this game. I guess I got my $60 worth.
Yeah, well, when you really think about it, Skyrim's just Minecraft.
Absolutely.
Everything goes back to Minecraft.
I think that's a really good point, Pete, that it's the biggest niche thing.
Yeah.
Because Ruby, you were like, I'm worried to get flamed. I'm not a huge Bethesda fan of their
People love Skyrim,
the titles that they developed. Like, I don't really love Skyrim. I was like, yeah, it's fine. Fallout, same, all that sort of stuff. But what I think is exciting, because I think Multifish in the chat said that I think the novelty of big is one of. Games are expected to be good and big, if big at all. But I do think that something like I look at Skyrim and I go, what is exciting about Starfield for me, as someone who's not particularly excited about Starfield, is what this will inspire other people to do. If it can reach, I'm not expecting that it necessarily reaches the heights of Skyrim, which I feel like is a once in a company lifetime, like it'll be their most beloved game of all time and it's on everything and it'll probably stay like that. But it will inspire other people to go like, okay, that in the same way that Skyrim had a sort of look at that mountain, you can go there. And then other games went, oh, I feel inspired to do that in my thing, or to reach in a way, take a system from there and include it in mine. The writing has always been such an important thing with Bethesda games. It's in terms of character work. Like you said, the plots are sometimes a bit like naff, but the characters are always really memorable. So things like that, I think Starfield will come out and will probably, if it's good, if it's good, have an effect like Breath of the Wild or something, where you go, we've seen this ripple out into other games in the future, and that's exciting to me.
Which I think in part, talking about, I think Breath of the Wild is a little bit in response to Skyrim.
Totally.
And it's probably the best Zelda game.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 100%. And then the fun thing, though, something that did pique my interest was that the ship combat in the first reveal looked a bit boring, I want to say, is a terrible word. I think it looked a bit simplistic. Ship combat is something that I think is really hard to do in video games. There are whole video games out there trying to make ship combat work and they don't do it. And this is just an aspect of it. But Howard came out and said that part of the combat has been inspired by FTL. And there's this whole balance when you're in there. It's not just about like, can you hit the shot? And it's about how much power are you putting into weapon systems, into shields, into your grav jump, and your engine and that sort of thing. And to me, that makes that ship combat more interesting because it feels like it's a bit more of a tactical thing that's going on of like, what am I choosing to do in this moment, as opposed to like, can I just land the shot in this like lumbering ship trying to turn in space? So that sounds pretty cool to me, and I'm interested to see more on that. So there was tons of information that came out after this, and a part of it did feel like we need to clarify a couple of things that we said.
Todd said,
like you mentioned, Pete.
Todd's always saying stuff.
Everyone puckered up, and it was like, we need to just slow this down and talk about this ice ball that's not very fun. Speaking of games that are not very fun, Overwatch 2. We saw a beta for that come out over the last couple of months, and it's got mixed reactions, I would say, at best. But one of the big pushes for Overwatch 2, and one of the reasons that we believed Overwatch 2 would exist, was because of single player content, that they wanted to add some sort of story, some sort of, you can just play this game by yourself and have a narrative, have all the stuff where it's like, we made an MMO, which is story based. It didn't work. We turned it into a shooter, but because we had all these characters from an MMO, all the characters in the shooter were really cool and really interesting, and people shipped them and wanted to learn more about them. And then as we continued making the game, esports pros don't give a shit about those characters, and we just catered for esports pros, and we stopped catering to the character side. So Overwatch 2 is just going to be about story, or not just about story, but a huge push of that. And what we learned last week was that Overwatch 2 story is not coming until next year, and it will be dropping as seasonal content, which is such a radical shift of what, at least for me, I expected Overwatch 2 to be. First of all, I expected it to launch with story, and the multiplayer would be just attached to that. Now, the multiplayer is going to be launching in October. There's going to be a beta in June. So this month, starting in 8 days, that's going to go on PC and consoles. But they're adding the story stuff as seasonal content starting next year. So they're going to be adding seasons that are going to be 9 weeks each. They're all going to be themed. Each season will bring either a new hero, a map, or a mode, and there's going to be a new hero every 18 weeks. So every second season, there's going to be a new hero added to the game. So there's a lot of like, I love the faces Ruby's making right now. There's a lot of information about like, I felt like this Overwatch 2 thing was, here is the content roadmap of how you will be spending money on our game, because this game is now free to play. It's not going to be something that you buy initially, and it's going to be mainly battle passes, and there's going to be a store as opposed to loot boxes. So you can buy skins in the store, and there's a battle pass. And this whole announcement was like, here's how often you'll be buying things in our game. By the way, the single player stuff, the thing that, at least for me, was the most interesting, is going to be rolled out seasonally as like these small drops, which I felt like they were already doing in Overwatch. They already had these like small story modes that would drop and would be like a hint of something. I don't know, Ruby, am I crazy thinking that this feels like a really big pivot away from what we initially thought when Jeff Kaplan announced there would be an Overwatch 2, what we thought we would be getting?
I'll start with, don't worry, Nick, you're not crazy. You're so valid.
Thank you.
Because, like, yeah, the thing is like, I never got into the gameplay of Overwatch because I'm bad at video games and I don't want anybody else to have to be a part of that or see that. So I like to play games on my own. And the thing is, the lore of Overwatch and the characters really interested me to a point where I was like, surely they're going to do spin-offs for, like, the characters and you're going to be able to play through the story and stuff like that. Like, that seems like a logical thing. You know, having a single-player mode seems logical considering they put so much work into these characters and their journeys and their stories. So with the first Overwatch, I was like, everything looks nice, but not a game for me. And then when Overwatch 2 was announced, I was like, oh, cool, a single-player mode. That sounds right up my alley. And what I've seen of Overwatch 2 gameplay seems like Overwatch.
Well said.
That's it. It just seems like Overwatch. Like it just seems like it could have been DLC or
just a 2.0 patch update.
Yeah, a patch.
Yeah,
like
which we've been saying, like, which I feel like everyone has been saying since it got announced. But then the comeback to that was, but they want to have this single player stuff. They want to really like add in this big story, and that's going to be the thing that pulls you. And that's not even coming now. And that I feel like the ambition of what they're doing, like Avexia in chat is talking about, like, there's no way they're going to keep up this cadence of every 18 weeks for a new hero. That's what they had when they initially launched Overwatch, was roughly every 18 weeks you were getting a new hero, but then that fell off pretty hard. This is like a level of adding content of maps, heroes, and that sort of thing, to then think that alongside that there's going to be single player story stuff that's developed that I now have no expectation it's going to be meaty. I just think it's going to be like a themed mode around a character that has some like interactions and maybe a cutscene or two, but not like I genuinely was thinking like Overwatch 2 is going to be Uncharted level of like fun adventure with these characters, and instead it's just moving away more and more from that. That makes me feel sad, I guess, not even because I love Overwatch so much. I just think that world has so much potential, and it just feels like it's been squandered from a story perspective, Pete.
Yeah. The only thing that I've got like that I can kind of reference it to is Halo 4 had a thing called Spartan Ops, which were 10 co-op story missions that released, but Halo 4 released with a campaign and a multiplayer fully fledged, like a 10, 12-hour single-player campaign. And then as seasonal content, I can't remember exactly how long it was between individual releases, but there were 10 episodes of this Spartan Ops, which was another story that was happening with side characters simultaneously. And the drip feed of that was something that, I mean, was effective at the time. No one really cared about those characters, but I'm sure they had at least half of that developed before they dropped the game, and then 6 months later started to release this Spartan Ops thing. I don't know that they could keep up with an 18-week turnaround of not just characters and balancing those, but a team working on, particularly with the commitment that the Blizzard have to how good their cutscenes look, to develop story with cutscenes, with character arcs. If they had a year's worth, if the reason that they've knocked it back is to buy themselves 6 months to start that cadence of storytelling as well, then maybe, I mean, obviously, well, you would think that they would tie the new character in each time there's a new campaign drop as well, which kind of just feels hamstrung as well. It's like, this piece of content only exists because of new character, as opposed to there being an interesting story happening in the Overwatch universe. It's just, we've encountered this problem that only Mr. Punchy Gerbil can solve. And introducing Mr. Punchy Gerbil, who enters the scene as a new hero in Overwatch. So it's like, that's what it feels like. It'll just be an extended introduction to a character as opposed to a campaign with an interesting plot.
That's Mr. Punchy Gerbil, yeah.
To you.
He only
It's
has
Dr.
one
Punchy
problem
Gerbil to you.
but he solves it well. Middle C in chat brings up a potentially good point, which is even Destiny doesn't successfully balance story content with PvP content. Story content is prioritized and it shows. Overwatch would need to do the same and they just won't. And that's a good point that running a PvP game is hard enough, let alone trying to do an awesome story as well. So yeah, I don't know. It's just the more I hear about Overwatch 2, the more I feel like Jeff Kaplan left and the game just went, okay, he was the guy trying to push it in this direction.
Yep.
And we're now pivoting away from that. That we're chasing something a bit different now. And they probably announced things too early and have been reworking a lot of stuff on the fly. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, it really just feels like they've given you like the most interesting intro to an essay. Like, it really enthralls you and makes you want to read the whole thing. And then the body is just lorem ipsum.
How is Lauren?
That is such a journalist joke. That is such a I'm in the back end of my CMS and that's great. But it's so true. That's exactly what it is. Okay, cool. So those are the stories that caught our eye this week. In terms of announcements and delays, I mean, we had Summer Game Fest. So much stuff was announced. We're not going to go through it all. We've covered it over the last couple of weeks. The one thing that I did want to bring up was the Final Fantasy stuff that got announced last week. This was after the big press conferences, and that is Square announced that the second installment in Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming. It's called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's also the second installment of 3, not 2. So it's a trilogy. There's Remake, Rebirth, and then something else. They're also taking Crisis Core, which was a PSP game and a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, and they are remastering, releasing that as well. And so that's coming this winter, which is this summer, so towards the end of the year, across PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC as well. So some cool Final Fantasy VII news. I really liked that Final Fantasy VII Remake. I haven't finished it yet. I do intend to. And the fact that there's now 2 more of these games coming it's like the most epic task that they've given themselves. Like, they've chained themselves to this thing. Thankfully, though, the thing that they've chained themselves to is making them a fortune. So people are excited.
Yep.
Okay, that is literally all the video game news that's happened this week.